first thing you're going to want to do is open up a web browser, and you're going to want to download the Ubuntu server ISO. So you can get that directly from ubuntu.com. I've already downloaded it, but I'm just going to show you where the link is and what it looks like. And you can go ahead and start that download. It takes about, I'd say, maybe 10 to 15 minutes to download. It's about a 900 megabyte file, so it can take some time. Once you've got that downloaded, you're going to want to open up VirtualBox. If you haven't downloaded that already, go ahead and do so now. The setup for that is pretty straightforward, so you pretty much download it, install it, and run it. And once you have your Ubuntu downloaded, what we're going to do is create a new instance of a virtual environment. Alright, it's going to be an Ubuntu 64-bit Linux system. For this project, about 2 gigs of RAM is plenty enough, so right around 2048. You can even go lower, especially if there's only going to be 1 or 2 people managing this software. You don't need to have too much going on there. As far as hard drive space, I'm going to give this project about 64 gigs. If you have a ton of assets, you can bring it up to 256, but these aren't huge files unless you're planning on uploading a lot of photos. All right, and within the settings pane here, you want to make sure that the network is a bridged adapter, and you also want to mount the ISO that we downloaded at this point. So we're going to choose a virtual optical disk file, and we're going to search our downloads folder or desktop, wherever you downloaded it to, and go ahead and open it up. Alright, and this is the kind of beginning installer of Ubuntu server. There is no graphical user interface here, so you're going to have to kind of follow along with the plain text and such. So go ahead and choose your language, the country that you're from. You don't have to detect a keyboard layout, you can just pick it from the list. I find that to be faster, and from here we'll just let it roll. And just kind of like a FYI, we're going to be using SSH in terminal since I'm on a Mac. You can use any other, if you're in Windows, you can use CMD or command prompt. The reason we're going to be using it is because there's going to be some kind of copying and pasting, and I just find it easier to use the command prompt to kind of paste back and forth if necessary. It gets a little lengthy within Ubuntu server itself, so I'm going to walk through that process with you guys. It's going to be pretty straightforward. So here we're going to rename the host name to SnipeIT. That's kind of a theme that I'm going to stick to. Even for the username, we're going to use SnipeIT. It's just less to remember when it comes to like entering information. And we're going to create a new password for this user. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to make the password Apple, all lowercase. You can obviously make it something different. I recommend you do, especially if this is going to be your production server. And the time zone is correct. Okay, and then we're going to use guided use entire disk. And enter, yes. And we're going to continue through that. Let this finish installing. And we're not going to be using any proxies, so go ahead and hit return to continue. And while this is running, I'd just like to give a quick shout out to Snipe, or Snipey Head herself. She is an excellent developer. This is, you want to pick LAMP server here and open SSH. Use that doing that by using the spacebar to highlight and then just return to continue. All right, and then we're going to create a new password for, this is the root user of MySQL. And I'm using the same password, apple, throughout, just so that I don't have to remember 4 different passwords. But anyway, yeah, back to SnipeIT. She is kind of the brains behind this project, and there is a paid version which has support. I do recommend it if you do run into any kind of troubles. Other than that, there is a great kind of community forum where you can go for support, and she's also on there kind of giving everyone advice. I think there's a small team working on this project. You can check out her website. I think it's like snipe.net, and then there's more information about her and the things she does, but really awesome kind of project that she put out there. Really useful tool. Alright, and you can go ahead and hit yes for the Grub bootloader. And the installation is completed, so you can click continue or hit return rather, since there is no actual mouse activity here. And we'll let it load up. And you can go ahead and log in. So my user was SnipeIT, and go ahead and return and type the password that you created. Alright, the first thing I'm doing right now is just changing the root password. That's done by typing sudo passwd, WD, without the actual word. And that's so that I can log in as root if I ever needed to. We're not necessarily going to log in as root, because we're going to be doing this from the regular SnipeIT account that we just created, but it's good to have anyway. And the next thing I'm going to do is also enable SSH login. So we're going to change directory, cd, and we're going to go to /etc/SSH, and we're going to nano config the, we're going to nano or edit the SSHD config file to allow root login from a remote server. Alright, and always remember to type sudo in front of commands that we're doing like this, because otherwise we won't have permission to make these changes. So right down to where it says permit root login, you're just going to change it to yes, and then hit Control X and return to confirm the changes. Drop down a few lines, and I'm going to get the IP address now by typing ifconfig. Alright, so that's 10.0.1.28, and this is where our terminal is going to come in handy. Alright, let's minimize that window and log in with SSH. SnipeIT at 10.0.1.28. And the reason I'm using SnipeIT instead of root is because there are some instances in the SnipeIT documentation where it is recommended to not run like a composer with the root user. So we're going to be using our standard admin user. Alright, looks like we're logged in. Right now I'm just going to run some updates. Oops, and I forgot to type sudo first. I'm probably going to do that a bunch of times just because I'm not used to writing it. I'm used to working from the root user, so you don't have to type sudo out every time. But in this instance, for this purpose, we're going to be doing that. Okay. In case you missed what I did there, I just typed clear just to clear out the screen. And now we're going to type sudo curl -ss https:// get composer, and this is straight from the SnipeIT documentation. .org and /installer space PHP and return. All settings are correct. Awesome. Just what we want. And now we know we have our PHP composer.phar file in our kind of home folder, or kind of root directory if you want to call it that, of the SnipeIT account. Now what we're going to do is actually move that file. So sudo mv composer.phar into the user local bin /composer directory. Right, and you'll know that the file is moved. If you type ls, you'll see that there's nothing in the directory. Prior to that, that composer file was in there. All right. Now we're going to change our directory again. This is where we're actually going to download the SnipeIT portion. So once we've changed our directory, we're going to sudo git clone https:// and we're going to go to the GitHub page of Snipe's account, and we're going to download the clone. Okay, and then you're going to make a space, and you're going to type SnipeIT or whatever you like, but that essentially designates the folder where that information is going to be going to within the www directory. Right, everything completed successfully. We're going to change the directory one more time, and we're going to go inside of the new folder that we just created. It's going to be SnipeIT. Excellent. And now we're going to make a copy of the env file and rename it .env, but I forgot to type sudo again, so just going to erase that. And we're going to do cp.env.example. So we're taking essentially the example file that's there and creating a new one named .env. We're going to come back to this file later. Just make sure you don't have any typos, as every period counts. Every space, underscore, and dash, colon, and semicolon. It's not programming, but you have to be extremely careful while doing it. All right, and now we're gonna go ahead and create the database. So mysql-u root-p, and then we're gonna enter the password that we created earlier during our LAMP server setup. Okay. This portion here is coming from the documentation as well, so we're going to create a database. You can name it whatever you like, but for consistency's sake, I named it SnipeIT. And with MySQL syntax, you have to end each line with a semicolon. Alright, so we got that created. Now we're going to grant permissions to our database user. So grant all on, and here you don't have to type sudo because here we're working within MySQL and not within Ubuntu server. All right, you can go ahead and follow along with the text. All right. And this identified by portion is essentially your password. So like I said, I'm going to keep it consistent, just Apple, Apple. And semicolon, and we're going to return. All right, and we're going to flush privileges. Excellent. And we're going to type /Q, and that's going to quit. You can also type quit with a semicolon, but that's just a quick shortcut. So we're going to drop down a few lines, and we're going to sudo nano.env. So we're going to go ahead and edit the env file that we created earlier. Now that we have our database information, we can go ahead and plug that into our env file. We can also enter our app URL. My app URL is the IP address of the server. We'll get into more detailed kind of how to attach a domain to this if you ever want to access it from outside the web. But in the meantime, we're just going to keep it simple, something that you can use within your network. Okay, so the database name that we created was SnipeIT, also the username was SnipeIT, and then finally our password was Apple. All right, and all the rest of the settings for now, since we're not configuring a mail server or anything like that, we're just going to keep it real simple. Okay, drop down a few more lines, and in case you missed it, Control X is to exit, and then enter to save changes. Okay, now we're gonna change some permissions, and this is also coming from the SnipeIT documentation. We want to make sure that we have the appropriate read and write permissions on the server, or on the site rather. Alright, we're going to drop down a few lines. And this is a portion where you're going to take out your text edit file. I'll also have this in the description for you. And we're going to install some dependencies. We're going to let those run. There was one that I forgot to add to that. Since there was an update that was released, there was another dependency that was required for a composer to install properly. So we'll just install that right now. So same thing, sudo apt install, and it's PHP, and then it's a math, BC math, -BC math. Alright, then it'll ask yes, we'll hit Y, hit return. That's a pretty quick install. Drop down a few more lines just for some clarity. And now we're going to do sudo composer install. All right, -- no -dev, so we don't want the developer version. -- prefer to get it from the source. Okay, and then let's hit return. All right, and then you can see this yellow warning here. It says do not run composer as root. So we're installing it as root, but we're not running it as root. we'll let this run out. This might take maybe 2 to 3 minutes. There are a bunch of dependencies that are required for this. It's just about 75 installs, so it can take a little bit, but in any case, we'll let that run. Right, and once this is done installing all of the dependencies, we are going to create or generate the app key using Artisan. So we'll drop down a few lines, and we'll type PHP space artisan key : generate. Don't forget the sudo. It's going to ask for your password. And it says, are you sure you really want to run this command? I'm going to say yes. And the app key was set successfully. So this actually gets automatically placed into the .env file. But if you want to be extra sure, you can just double check and make sure that it is in there. All right, and now we're going to go to the Apache 2 sites available directory, and we're going to create a new file in there. We're going to name it snipeit.example.com. conf, or kind of like a config file. So this is from the site and how it was kind of written in documentation, but you can really name this anything you like. But for kind of being kind of on track with the documentation, we're going to do it the same way. Alright, and this is also going to be something we're going to copy and paste. The server name, you just want to make sure that you have your IP address there. You don't need the HTTP or anything like that. At least, for this portion or this method of the install. And also, you want to have it that the hashtag is there by the redirect permanent. We're not going to utilize that. And we'll do Control-X and hit return twice to save the changes and save the file. So this is actually a new file that's created. It's not a file that was already in there. All right, and at this point, we are going to make some connections. Connections or associations, whatever you want to call it. basically letting Apache know which file is to be used. And we're going to restart Apache. And remember that sudo, otherwise you're going to have to arrow key back and add it in. Okay, and it's gonna ask for our SnipeIT password. All right, and right now we're going to disassociate the 00, the kind of the default config file in Apache. I take it a step further, and actually remove that file. First, I copy it, give it a different name, and then remove it, just so that there's no confusion. And then, if I ever need that file in the future, I can always go back in there and use it and rename it to its original name. That's coming up. Just going to reload Apache and drop a few lines. Let's go into the directory of sites available. So that's cd/etc/apache2/sites-available. All right, and then ls, and you can see that we have all three files in there, including the SnipeIT example one that we created and that 00-default config file. So what I'm going to do is copy the config file and give it a new name. You'll do that followed by space and a different name. So I'm going to name it .conf KGB, KGB standing for known good board. But you can give it any kind of extension you want. Doesn't really matter. This is just for your kind of reference. And list, we're going to ls, and you see that file is in there. And now I'm going to sudo rm the default -ssl.config file, just so that there's no confusion as to where the kind of document root is supposed to be coming from. Not that there will be, but I guess it's kind of just beating it with a stone. Alrighty, let's drop a few lines down. Alright, now that I deleted that, I'm just going to reset the associations one more time. Okay, and now we're going to type out the IP address, and we should be brought to the SnipeIT kind of setup page or pre-flight. So we're getting green check marks all across the board. The one thing that we're not getting is the files are owned by root, which is kind of odd because we aren't in root. We're using a regular user. So I think that might be a bug. I'll have to take a second look, but in any case, we're running this locally on our server, so we don't have to kind of worry about that. But Refresh the page once. That's also something, for whatever reason, it comes up kind of odd. So once you refresh, it'll clear that out, and then you can go ahead and fill out the rest of the information. And you got to remember, this is only the first kind of release of this new version. Prior to this, this was on version 3. Right now we're on version 4, so there will be some kind of bugs that will be worked out, but Snipe is pretty good at releasing fixes and patches for any kind of bugs that appear. On our production version, we're gonna hang around on the version 3 for a little while, but I expect that within a month or so we're probably gonna jump into the version 4.0. The interface has some improvements. Importing looks a little different. You do have more flexibility when you're importing, from like a CSV file. But overall, really a solid IT asset management software. You can also connect your LDAP server to this, so you get all your users. Really powerful tool. Printing labels, labeling all your assets is really fantastic. But this is what the kind of interface looks like. You can create a new asset there. So you can import users. You can import assets, from a CSV file, so you don't have to, add them in one by one. Really nice user interface. Kind of just a smooth flowing web interface. And this also works great on mobile. So if you have an iPad or an iPhone, excellent. You can generate 2D barcodes, so that barcodes and QR codes, so that you can scan them using your phone, your iPhone, especially with iOS 11. You can open the app right up, scan the QR code, and it'll bring you directly to the assets page. So super powerful tool. It's tremendous that she's still offering this for free. But for people who don't have the time or the resources to troubleshoot and manage the environment, there is a paid version. So you guys should definitely check that out. But other than that, thanks for watching, and hope to see you back next time when we kind of go over the uploading and specific features of SnipeIT.